Today's Glitch in the Matrix video is completely filled with stories that have been submitted to me. So a huge thank you to everyone who submitted their glitches to me. And if you have one you want to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it. And of course, thank you. While I experienced a time glitch at work last year in May of 2021, it was not my first time-related glitch in the Matrix. My first glitch related to time took place at the library at the University of California, Santa Barbara, during my first year of college. Note, this is a rather detailed composition of my experience. Originally, I had written about it near the time of the event in an email, before forwarding it across several email accounts, and then finally transferring my story to my long-defunct online journal. Rest in peace, Zanga, in the blog section of MySpace. I finally decided to share this publicly, with a few present-day details. I attended UCSB from 2000 to 2004. I barely went out in order to not spend any money, if possible, and probably used all the credits on my meal plan for the school year. Quick shout out to Ortega Dining Commons for the takeout meals that sustained me during some all-night cramming sessions. As a bookish student, I spent a lot of time at Davidson Library in my freshman year, choosing the floor I would study at with no rhyme or reason. By the end of the school year, I could honestly say that I have studied on each floor of the library at least once, including inside the spectacular Pacific View room on the 8th floor. Halfway into the first quarter of the school year, in the middle of October of 2000, I began preparing for my midterms. I was not the type of person who could study at home, treating my dorm room at Santa Rosa Residence Hall as my bedroom and nothing else. The glitch took place after I had taken half of my midterms. I had taken 2 of my midterms in as many days so far, and met up with my roommates at Ortega for lunch at around noon. Afterward, we parted ways as he headed for the University Center, USEN, to start his shift at the bookstore, thanks to a work-study program, while I headed over to Davidson Library. I entered the library through the Davidson entrance since, at the time, it was the main entrance to the library. This shows my age, as major renovations saw the construction of a new library entrance and a wing a decade after I graduated and left the school. I headed for the Oceans elevator, a set of 3 elevators with access to all 8 floors of the library tower, and I pressed the up button. The middle elevator opened immediately. I stepped inside, turned around, and pressed the button for the 8th floor. After a short wait, the elevator doors closed, and I went up to the 8th floor alone without stopping on any of the floors in between. When the elevator doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped outside the elevator and took 2 steps, and abruptly stopped in my tracks. I was surrounded by the exposed concrete floor slab, save for the elevated tile flooring I was standing on directly in front of the elevator. There was construction equipment and bags of masonry material everywhere, but there were no walls or windows to speak of. Undoubtedly, the place that I ended up was under construction and open to the elements. I went back inside the elevator to see which floor I was on, and the LED panel showed a number 8 with a down arrow. Tentatively, I went back outside and walked straight from the elevator due west toward the edge of the apparent construction area. In the distance, I saw the setting sun slowly dipping below the horizon of the Pacific Ocean. If you go to the beach to watch the sunset at UCSB over the course of the year, you'll see that, thanks to the tilt of the Earth. The sun sets over the Pacific Ocean during the colder winter months, and over the California mainland during the warmer spring and summer months. Seeing the sunset caught me off guard almost right away, since it was not supposed to occur for several hours. After all, my roommate and I had left the dining commons together at about 5 minutes before 1 p.m. so that he wouldn't be late for work. I was further shocked by something else I saw, or rather didn't see. I looked down at the Usen by the campus lagoon, and Stork Tower was not there. I mean, there's no way anyone on campus could overlook a bell and clock tower that stands at 175 feet, let alone from the vantage point of the 8th floor of the library. I turned to my right, looking due north, and saw the peaks of the Santa Ynez Mountains, covered in snow. As far as I knew, no precipitation of any kind had fallen yet in the Santa Barbara area since the beginning of the school year. Never mind any rain in the local beach areas, and especially not any snow in the local mountains. While I stared at the snow-covered mountains, a small plane emerged from just below my field of vision and gained altitude, apparently taking off from the local airport. After the plane disappeared from sight, I looked down and saw the rooftop of the original 2-story library adjacent to the library tower. I did an about-face and looked due south toward the Pacific Ocean. In the distance, I saw Santa Cruz Island of the Channel Islands archipelago, just off the coast. When I looked down, I was stunned to find that the 4-story wing built just south of the library tower was missing. In its place were far more bicycle racks than I remember seeing previously, as these bike racks extended from the bike path to the edge of the library tower. By the way, I had only been on the 8th floor for about 2 minutes so far, so I was somewhat surprised when I saw that the doors of the elevator I took were still open as I turned around. While taking all of this in, I snapped back to my purpose of being there at the library in the first place, and promptly headed due east for behind the elevators, where the Pacific View room should have been. Unfortunately, this area was also under construction. I looked over this edge of the concrete floor slab, and I saw Webb Hall below. Given the distance between the library and Webb Hall, another building could very well fit in the open space. I looked up, and in the distance, I saw the Mesa, an expansive neighborhood in the city of Santa Barbara. UCSB is technically in the city of Goleta, but that's a story for another time. The neighborhood diverted my attention for something I was not expecting to see: streetlights. The apparent sunset meant that the streetlights were slowly turning on throughout the city as it became evening. I was not going to get caught in the darkness of an apparently unfinished library floor that did not have electricity or lights, nor did I want to stick around in a place and time that was very different from the one that I came from. I headed for the elevator that I took, since the doors were still open, and pressed the 1 button. The doors promptly closed, and I headed back downstairs. As I made my way down, I had come to the disconcerting conclusion that some way, somehow, I went back in time. It wasn't just an abrupt change in time of day either. I briefly ended up in the past, when the library tower was still under construction, while Stork Tower and the 4-story wing of the library did not yet exist. When I reached the first floor, I stepped outside the elevator and looked to my right. I saw the long passageway connecting the library tower to the original library. Adjacent to the elevators were several payphones, as well as a dorm phone. My roommate and I opted to not get a landline for our dorm, since we had cell phones anyway. I turned to my left and walked towards the entrance that I had just walked through mere minutes ago. To my enormous relief, I saw the current serials section, which houses printed magazines, journals, and newspapers, and is located on the lower level of the first floor of the 4-story wing. Next to the entrance of this section is a staircase leading to the Ethnic and Gender Studies section on the second floor of the same wing. There were lots of people on the staircase going in both directions as I headed for the exit. I looked through the glass doors and realized that not only was I back in the present time, but also the same time of day as when I arrived there, just 5 minutes ago. As I stepped outside the library, soaring between Gervitz Hall and the music library was Stork Tower. I walked toward the tower and paused upon arriving at the entrance of the music library. I continued looking up at the Stork Tower, still pondering what I had seen while up in the library tower. I went inside the USEN, found a table outside of a cafe, and studied for my third midterm until 5 p.m. when my roommate got off work at the bookstore. He was surprised to see me, of course. Over dinner, back at the Ortega, I told him everything that I had experienced just after lunch that day. He was skeptical, but he ultimately believed me, especially because he felt that my earnest recollection of that day's events over the years, we still keep in touch to this day, was the only time that he had ever sensed fear in me. This was the one and only such event that I ever experienced during my time at UCSB. I've been to the 8th floor of the library tower countless times since, until I graduated, but I never went back in time again. I've taken my roommate and our friends there. I've taken my family there when my sister was exploring colleges. She ended up going to UCSC. She'd rather be a banana slug than a gaucho, I guess. I've taken classmates and even a girlfriend there. Sadly, I was not able to replicate my experience of going back in time with any of them. During the elevator rides to the 8th floor, I would secretly hope that the doors would open to a construction site with random but prominent features from the university's skyline missing in all directions, only to be disappointed upon seeing the scale model of the university as soon as the elevator doors opened on the 8th floor, and, ultimately, a long ago fully built library floor with a spectacular view of the Pacific Ocean, each and every time. A few years ago, I lived in a cul-de-sac in a small, safe suburb. The kind where you're passively friendly with your neighbors. Across from my house was a little red house where lived a man in his late 30s, Ron, his wife, and their 2 young children. Our children would play together in the street, we would exchange favors and Christmas cards, etc., and so our families were somewhat close. In the blue house beside them lived Ron's parents, which I always thought was nice that they could see each other often. One early summer evening, while still fully light out, the weather was nice, so I was out on my front porch to relax for a moment. I see Ron walking out of his parents' blue house, telling them goodbye. He's carrying a gallon of milk in his left hand. No bag, just the milk. I thought, how convenient that he can borrow milk from his parents next door instead of having to just go buy it. I didn't call out to him as I figured he was busy. He walked into his little red house and shut the door. Maybe a minute later, Ron's car pulls up into the driveway. I thought nothing of it until, to my surprise, Ron himself gets out of the car. In his left hand, he's holding a yellow plastic grocery bag that I recognize as being from the corner store up the block. The bag is transparent so I can see inside. A gallon of milk. Being confused, I again decided not to call out to him, He again walked into his little red house and shut the door behind him. I imagine at home his wife had asked him to go get milk, and through some strange glitch, he did. Twice. In 2 different ways. I wonder if that evening his wife found 2 gallons of milk in the kitchen. As requested, this is a follow-up story to the one that you posted on February 21st, 2022. And this occurred in 2004, 2 months after the first incident, and on a different TV set. It was the day after Christmas, and I was feeling a bit bloated from all the leftovers and desserts. So I decided to go work it off on my stationary bike in our exercise room, which had an old TV with a CRT screen. I asked my husband to put in a DVD while I changed. A few minutes later, I heard him muttering, "Impossible, there's no input." I joined him in the exercise room to find out what the problem was. On the screen, there was a kind of arty black and white image of a hand with the fingers splayed outwards on a background of either shattered glass or dimpled decorative glass. See now on the photo. There is a photo on screen if you're listening and not looking. I'm so glad that we took the photo with my first generation Nokia cell phone. While it wasn't a great photo, it was clearly recognizable and had a date stamp. My husband is somewhat of an expert in all things electronic. He showed me the setup. The TV was plugged in, but there was no DVD, no broadcast, no VHS tape, and no game. Nothing to provide input. This very dramatic image remained on the screen until we unplugged the TV. A little later that night, we were watching the news, and we were shocked to find out that, practically at the very hour that we saw the image, that famous 2004 tsunami had hit Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. The wiki write-up is titled 2004 Indian Ocean Earthquake and Tsunami. You may have seen the 2012 movie entitled The Impossible about this horrific event that killed 228,000 people. In the movie, you'll see a lot of panic and shattered glass. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. I have a really weird story that happened to me about 6 months ago. And it's actually one of those things that really messed with my head after it happened. Like I said, this was around my birthday, which is in the first week of August. I just turned 18 last year, so I still live with my parents, as I've been finishing school and planning on my college. And my brother also lives with us. He's 22, and during the pandemic he lost his job, and his lease on his apartment also came up for renewal, so he decided that moving back home when he had the opportunity to do so was a good idea. The week of my birthday, we were planning a family dinner to celebrate, and we were going to have my grandma and my aunts come over. Basically, it was supposed to be a fun little get-together among close family, making the most of what we had and the day in general. My mom was making dinner, my grandma and my aunts were all in the living room talking, and my dad and siblings were out in the backyard. My mom then lets out a fairly large, "Damn it," and naturally, thinking something was wrong, I walked in and asked if she was okay. She tells me to go get my brother, so I do. She then mentions to him that she had forgotten to get the candles for my cake. I tell her it's not really a big deal, that we don't need to do all that, and she insists, saying it's my last birthday as her little girl, and that this would be the last time she could ever do this for me. I wasn't going to fight it after that. She had her mind set on what she wanted to do, and that was it. My brother gets his keys, and he asks me if I want to go with him to the store. At first I said yes, but then my mom chimed in and said, "No, I want you to go spend time with your grandma. He'll be fine." I say sorry, and he makes a comment about how he's going to find yellow candles since I don't have to go. I hate the color yellow with a passion, so this was him taunting me. I head to the living room, he goes out to his car, and we move on from there. I was sitting in the living room talking to my grandma when I got hit with this really weird sense of dread. It was like a panic attack was coming on, but it was not a panic attack. It was this really weird feeling of the entire world coming down on me. That's the only way I know how to explain it. I was feeling normal, and within the next few minutes, I was feeling like the literal sky was crashing down around me, and that the earth was going to split in two and swallow me up without a second thought. I excused myself as best as I could and ran to the bathroom. As soon as I shut the door, I got this horrible feeling like I was literally punched in the stomach. If you've ever been punched, you know the feeling. Your lungs empty, you hunch over instinctively, your eyes start to water, and you can feel the blood pressure building up in your eyes. Don't ask how I know this. At this point, I'm sitting on the floor of the bathroom feeling like I had just gotten my ass kicked, and still feeling this god-awful sense of dread. And I have no idea how long I was just sitting there and waiting for it to pass. I would say it was probably 10 to 15 minutes or so before I opened the door to head back out. And as soon as I did, I saw my mother, grandmother, and my aunts all in the back living room, all kind of huddled up and crying. I head in, and as soon as I get in there, my mom turns to hug me tightly, and then tells me that my brother was in an accident, and that he was being rushed to a nearby hospital. She said that he wasn't in critical condition, but that he was really badly banged up, and that they were going to head up there to see him right away. Long story short on this, he was hit nearly head-on by another car. Someone that wasn't paying attention to the road, and had pretty much taken a left turn straight into his car. He had a couple broken bones, but nothing terribly severe, and if anyone cares, he has made a full recovery. The part that gets me, that actually bothers me, is that this person hit the passenger side of the car more than the driver's side. And based on what I saw of the car, if I had been in that seat, I would have most likely been severely injured or worse. And based on the timeline of events, he most likely got hit around the same time I started feeling that horrible dread and the pain in my stomach. I know that this sounds really dumb to some people, but in my mind, I was supposed to be in that car. I'm not a huge believer in fate or destiny, but I feel like that was supposed to be my end. Somehow, my mom managed to intervene with what was supposed to happen, and told me that I had to stay. But because she changed what was supposed to happen, I ended up still feeling some of what had happened. Almost like I was still in the seat at that time, but it was out of place. I know that sounds really weird and maybe hard to understand, but I really do feel like I did some sort of weird quantum timeline shift and managed to get out of a fatal situation. However, the Matrix was a bit slow to update, and I still got to feel what I would have felt in the crash. I was on a French exchange when I was 12 years old, and I dreamed of a place that seemed important at the time, if you know what I mean. It was stylized, but when I moved continents at 30 and started working at a large software company in the Pacific Northwest, I'd never even visited the US before, the campus was instantly recognizable. The cafeteria with outdoor tables, the small offices with phones and futons, and even the unnaturally steep waterfall. It turned out that it was because it was unnatural. Who would have guessed? And made it unmistakable. Even my office mate, a Mormon, had that same puzzled feeling that I had, and said that even though it wasn't in accordance with Mormon doctrine, he was sure we had met somewhere before, and that I was exactly where I should be right now. Assuming it's not just some fantastically wild coincidence, the alternative is even more disturbing. The site had not been built when I was 12. It simply didn't exist. And the series of events that led me there, initially, that was the last company that I wanted to work for, were an incredible series of coincidences and spontaneous decisions. So, if this were the case, where does that leave free will? If I was going to be there to the extent of some kind of future memory, how much actual choice did I have in those intervening 30 years, if it all led here? Have we already made all the choices, and this is just us watching them play out like reading a book after you've written it? I'm a male in my early 60s, and the following occurrence happened about 20 years ago on a semi-rural road in northeast Ohio, about 5 miles northeast of the Akron-Canton Airport. My wife and I were taking a casual Sunday afternoon ride on the Harleys when we turned onto a 1.5-mile long stretch of road heading north away from the airport. I happened to glance up to my left, and I noticed a commercial jet airplane, which would have been passing by heading southwest towards the airport in a descending slope. It was fairly close to us, and it would have been about as big as your pinky finger held out at arm's length. I didn't notice right away, but as we proceeded to pass by this plane, it slowly became apparent that it was not moving as a normal plane should. In fact, it appeared to be standing still in midair. I yelled at my wife to check that plane out, and we pulled over to a stop since there were no other cars on the road. That plane hung right where it was the entire time that we sat there, for 2 to 3 minutes. My very tech-challenged wife seemed to think that jet planes do that sort of thing all the time. Not in my universe, they don't. I did some poking around the internet, and I found a few videos that people have of the same thing happening to them. I have never forgotten my experience with a glitch in the Matrix. Hey Raven, it's JJJ. I decided to share this story because it's kind of been itching at me since I found these videos. So, this was back when I was in the 5th grade, when our teacher was absent. I have no clue why, it's been a while. And we had a substitute who was this young lady with brown hair and green eyes. I'll call her Miss Clark for this story. So, Miss Clark introduced herself, and then set us off in groups to do our work. Then, lunch came, and went, and we returned to our class, and when I looked up at the teacher, I was a little confused. There's this older woman with grayish hair and dark brown eyes. At first, I thought that there was a sub-switch, but I looked at her name tag and it still said Miss Clark, with the same first name, spelled the same. I looked at my friend that I'll call Sean, who also looked confused at what he was seeing while everyone else seemed not to notice this weird change. After the initial shock wore off, I just decided to go on with the day, and did, until the end of the day. I walked past Miss Clark in the hallway, the original Miss Clark that I saw earlier. I ran to my bus and kept my head down until I got home. I still think about this, and I even discuss it with Sean from time to time. This happened at the end of June 2016. I was going through a low point and I wasn't taking care of myself, living like I didn't care if I died. A friend was trying to get me out more, doing things, anything to distract me from my problems. My friend took me to a horror convention. I didn't like horror and still don't, but I went anyways, secretly hoping to meet a single gothic girl or something. The week before, while watching the news, the Today Show, for clarity, they had an entire segment about the passing of Gene Wilder. I wasn't a fan or anything, I just thought his story was sad. I saw things that I didn't know about him. When we went to the convention, the only living actor from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was there signing autographs. They had a huge billboard with the morbid fact that this kind old man was the sole surviving actor. I thought it was disrespectful to Gene Wilder's recent passing, and all they did was talk about it. I didn't meet any single women there. It wasn't a bad experience, but it wasn't exciting either. A month after, I was watching the Today Show again before work, only to see that Gene Wilder had died again. I was like, what the hell? The Today Show is live, so they don't have reruns. I checked several other sources, and it was true that he had died again. Well, not again for the rest of the world. I instantly called my friend. I asked about the horror convention. Everything was the same, minus the whole sole survivor part. My friend insists that we never had a conversation about the morbid billboard or the disrespectful nature of it, nor had the topic of Gene Wilder come up at all. I know that we did. It was the main topic of conversation for the entire convention for us. I asked him, well, what did we talk about then? My friend insists that we talked about Willy Wonka and a few other horror movies, and how I thought that horror movies were a product of lazy writing meant for people who aren't smart enough to understand science fiction. I don't remember that at all, but I totally agree with myself. I just wouldn't have said it so rudely. I now, since then, quote that line that my other self said. I thought it was a Mandela effect, but I checked around and no one else remembers Wilder dying that time and coming back. I did have a few close calls driving right after that convention, and other than that, I don't actually remember dying for quantum immortality to occur, but I suspect it to be the case. The final weird thing is, as I said, I wasn't a fan, nor had I cared about Gene Wilder, and I didn't watch the Today Show remembering Gene Wilder's segment the second time around. So, I did a bio search of him checking my memory of the segment that I supposedly never saw, and I knew his real name and history accurately. So, I proved to myself that it happened for me twice. And alas, here we are on the outro of this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection. I would like to say once again that every story in today's video was submitted to me either through the submission page on the website, astheravendreams.com, or the one story that was also submitted to my subreddit. Every single one of these was sent to me by a user that likes my stuff, knows who I am as far as channel goes, and wanted their story shared. And I hope I did it justice. And huge thank you to each and every single one of you that sent your story my way, as well as those who let me use their stories on Reddit. Thank you so very much. If you liked this video, please do hit that thumbs up button. It really helps the channel a lot. You can also subscribe if you're new to the channel. That helps tremendously. And if you would feel so bold, you could leave me a sentence down in the comments with this week's word of the week. Last week's word of the week was the word switch, and so many of you, 12 to be exact, left me a comment using said word of the week. Thank you to each and every single one of you who did leave me a comment. On screen now is this collection of comments that were left on last week's Glitch in the Matrix video. You guys are amazing. You always outdo yourselves, always outdo my expectations, and it still blows my mind that so many of you are still around and still commenting on my videos, even the stupid ones like that. So, the stupid videos, not the comments. That was not well said. Anyways, let's move on to this week's word of the week. This week, the word of the week appears to be appear. A-P-P-E-A-R. Which means to come into sight, become visible or noticeable, typically without visible agent or apparent cause, or to seem or give the impression of being. As in, it's Monday, and as such, it appears to be the day that Raven will post a glitch video. That was a bit paradoxical because you're at the end of the glitch video. It appears I'm going to end the video now, so sleep well.